Hello and welcome to the webinar. Today we are talking about hotel guest engagement, specifically how guest engagement techniques are having an impact on hotel revenue and costs. People in our industry talk about guest engagement quite a bit. I think it is a pretty broad concept though. It seems to appear to mean any sort of interaction between the hotel and guest done perhaps outside of the traditional front desk check-in interaction. Kind of everything else kind of falls under the category of guest engagement, I guess. So I guess here's a kind of maybe a silly question. So why do we want to engage with guests? I mean, this is actually a really key question. Is it to convey a level of service? Is it to create a better guest experience, which is, again, another very broad term that everyone throws around a lot? Or is there a commercial benefit in engagement, i.e. to get this guest to spend more? And actually, I would argue that all guest engagement ultimately has a commercial goal, whether it be immediate sales or long-term reputation development. Guest engagement is an attempt to raise hotels above being just a commodity, just a place to spend the night. But we all know that what the current challenge is in terms of providing guest engagement or engaging with guests or increasing service levels. And that's the labor shortage. Right now, hotels worldwide are struggling with the labor shortage. And that's because of the pandemic. It's also coupled with the fact that, even though ADR is okay, occupancy is quite low. So there's an economic impact there as well. The traditional human service interaction becomes tough when you have less humans to provide that interaction. So enter digital guest engagement. So new technology is providing new ways to generate value for the guest and in fact provide labor efficiencies for the hotel at the same time. As just a side note, I was in Dallas, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, and listened to a very interesting presentation by a gentleman by the name of Adam Sachs. He works with tourism economics, and these guys track trends that impact travel and tourism. And he basically said what we're all probably seeing at our hotels, and that is that the leisure transient business is leading the recovery, and business is lagging business travel. And as I said, ADR seems to be actually holding up pretty decently, but occupancy still is terrible and really bad for like large urban environments as well. But what that really means, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is that there's a greater focus now on competing for those few leisure travelers that are out there. So the question is can a strong digital guest engagement practice give hotels a competitive edge? And hopefully we can learn that from our panel today. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the table and everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into it. So Angie, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
All right, thank you. Hi, my name is Angie Andreessen. I work for Shiji Group, and I've been with Shiji for 3 years as a Senior Director of Global Product Management. At Shiji, we provide technologies to the hotel industry, to food and beverage, to retail, and to travel and transportation. You'll hear us say that we serve guests where consumers eat, sleep, shop, stay, and play. Prior to Shiji, I worked for Micro's Oracle for 14 years. And I've worked in many parts of hospitality, from getting my start, actually working in restaurants, and then crossed over to technology in the food and beverage space for both hotels and restaurants. So between Micros and Oracle and Shiji, I've worked in implementation of POS. Actually got my start installing 9700 in hotels a very long time ago. And then from there, I led teams in implementation, account management, and now product management for the last 8 years. And then since being with Shiji, I've expanded my work in hotel technology through working with our spa and golf product teams. So I appreciate the invite, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Robert, how about you introduce yourself?
Great, thank you, Paul, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's an exciting topic and a very timely topic. I'm Robert Stevenson, CEO of INTELITY. I'm actually a little bit more junior in terms of time in hospitality tech. I've been in about 5 years, but the company I'm running, INTELITY, is a merger of 2 prior companies. This has about 15 years of hospitality tech experience. And my prior life is an interesting mix of entertainment and platform technologies with big companies like Facebook and Sony, and building businesses that I've been involved in selling to them. So really excited to be here. Great topic, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Evan, let's go to you. You might want to click on your mute. There you go.
Hi all, I'm Evan. I'm one of the founders at Akia. My background prior to Akia is all in consumer messaging. So I was at Facebook for 4 years, where my team worked on products like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. After that, I moved over I started Akia to really bring messaging over to the hospitality industry. We facilitate all the communication and back and forth between hotels and their guests through text messaging. And through that, we deliver technology that we call mini apps. And these are apps that can be delivered over text messaging, don't need to be downloaded, don't need to be logged into, anything like that. And through that, hotels can do upgrades, upsells, they can sign registration cards, whatever it is they need to customize their customer journey.
Excellent. Thank you, Evan. And then Marvin.
Cool. Yeah. At first, thanks for having me. Marvin, one of the founders of Roompricegenie, and we enable hoteliers to automate their room pricing. So we ultimately believe in a world where every hotel prices their rooms dynamically with the help of data. Doesn't really fit perfectly into the customer engagement kind of box, but you will see in a second why automating your pricing will help you to actually improve the guest journey because you have more money at your hands. So yeah, that's what we do. So we believe that we can empower hoteliers worldwide to get equal chances to grow their businesses and to fulfill their dreams.
Great. Thank you, Marvin. And then finally, Yas, let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so my name is Schaap. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ROOMDEX. At ROOMDEX, we are focused on automating the process of room upsell, early arrival, late departure, and guest services. So anything that you want to offer to your guest along the digital way prior to arrival, during stay, or at the last day of the stay. Prior to ROOMDEX, I founded Stay in Touch PMS and sold that in 2018 to Shiji. Prior to that, I was for almost 18 years at Micros, where I was responsible for all hotel, opera, PMS, CRS, BI, and so on development. So got a little bit of history in this business, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Jans. All right, so I want to kind of set the stage by talking a little bit about the past and how things have evolved in terms of guest engagement, specifically kind of focusing on digital guest engagement. Robert, your company, INTELITY, I was looking on your website. It seems like you guys have been doing something like this since 2014, maybe earlier. And it looked like, based on the old press releases, that you kind of, the company started off in sort of in-room iPads. And so I guess what I'm curious about is you've probably seen this concept of digital guest engagement growing over time, and I'm interested in hearing about what you have seen in terms of kind of the evolution of guest expectations. Maybe that's a reflection of the evolution of guest use of technology, or what have you. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, good question, Paul. Yeah, we've been doing digital guest engagement since the dawn of the iPad, and even before. The idea was originally, iPad type stuff in public lobbies, and then moving it to the guest room, and now it's very mobile. So it's been 11, almost 12 years now, sort of pushing the envelope as much as can be done. But over that period of time, we've seen a lot of change, right? To sort of get to your question. And that change has not only been driven by hoteliers and guest demands, but also by other aspects of travel, right? If you think back over a decade ago, what did you have in terms of ride sharing, you know, getting in the car with some foreign person you've never met, and, you know, actually doing that through your mobile phone. I mean, is a kind of radical concept that nobody really envisioned would be part of day-to-day life. Same thing with airlines. I mean, airlines are very complex navigation experience technically from a security standpoint. And, you know, scroll back 10 years ago, and people thought of it as, hey, I have an airline app, so I can pull up my rewards account or something like that. It was the concept of, no, I'm going to go from my bedroom all the way to my destination and just hold my mobile phone the entire way. And that's really the only thing that I need today, right? So quite radical transformation across travel. And that's influenced hotels quite dramatically as well, right? Hotels have sort of been known as kind of late adopters to technology, and you know, maybe something where it just sort of reluctant to maybe mess with the guest experience if they've got it down to a science and they've got their exact flow that they want and they believe that's the right approach. But then these technologies have kind of crept in, you know, going from, I would say, call it sort of simple booking capabilities, simple rewards capabilities, either on a mobile device or perhaps a tablet in a lobby or some kind of situation like that, to actually going to what we call at INTELITY full flow, you know, the ability to grab the guest really from a mobile standpoint on ingress all the way through to they're checking out and they're getting their folio, and then you're maintaining contact with that guest either on mobile or through email or some other CRM mechanism. And so, you know, we've really gone from a very simple engagement to very complex engagements. I think the guest is demanding it because they're expecting it from other sources. You're also looking at younger generations that have started to travel. They've got more disposable income, and, you know, they're out traveling. You know, younger generations naturally are going to be more digitally disposed and more, you know, more digital citizens. That's what they've grown up with. And so you see that kind of guest side push, but you can also look at it from the hotelier need standpoint as well, which has only been heightened by the pandemic, which is, hey, look, we can't afford necessarily to have a big line in the front of the hotel, you know, on check-in, and the hotel next door doesn't have that line because they've been able to move people through a digital check-in process, or they've been able to alleviate some of the questions back and forth that are going on. You know, I look back from my entrance and into this space, and we were deploying mobile apps, of course, at that point in time. And we used to pin notifications on the app of like messages from the hotel. Like, this is kind of pre-COVID, which everybody's now used to getting the COVID message of wear a mask, keep space, you know, physical distance. The number one message, the one that people clicked on the most, was Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi password. And, you know, hotels would tell us all the time, you realize how much time that saves us, where people will call down, maybe the front desk forgot to write down the Wi-Fi code, maybe the guest missed it in the room, but the ability to just bypass that, you know, 30-second, 1-minute question, you know, that can happen hundreds of times a day is a real efficiency driver. And so from the hotel side, you look at it from that standpoint, some, you know, revenue opportunity, but an efficiency driver and an ability to alleviate, you know, everything kind of centered on beleaguered or busy staff, right? And so you've got the guest expectation, you've got the, you know, point of view coming from other areas of travel, and then you've got the hotelier need that have kind of driven this this transformation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when you see like a kind of an evolution of where you see, oh, here's an enhancement to the experience, and then very quickly it becomes an expectation of the experience. And then if you're not providing that, then you're the one with the long line, or you're the one who's answering the phone, giving the Wi-Fi password. And so therefore you're not adding to the guest experience. This is like the, dare I say this word, the new normal is providing that kind of level of digital engagement.
100%.
So Angie, I thought what was interesting is Robert kind of referenced airlines and other verticals. I know that Shiji, as in your introduction, Shiji kind of touches not just hotels, but, you know, retail and food service spaces. You know, when you look across Shiji's kind of portfolio of products and in industries it serves, are you seeing any crossover in terms of digital engagement technologies or strategies or things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's often crossover between these different verticals, in particular with hotels and food service. So I think if you really look back, you could say that the digital experience for both hotels and food services, it really began with being able to book a table and with being able to book a room online, right? For restaurants, it was the advent of Open Table in the late 90s, and for hotels, it was the OTAs. Restaurants, they've really been trying to get into the digital experience in front of the guests for decades. It's been with digital menu boards to get point of purchase messages across, or with kiosk in quick service restaurants for self-ordering, or even guest-facing devices for ordering in table service restaurants. And then they were originally doing these things because they give you a 20 to 30% uplift in sales. And then restaurants, they've also been in the online ordering and delivery space for over a decade now. But the current times have led to the acceleration of guest-facing technology adoption. So since early 2020, digital engagement technology, it's really experienced a new level of velocity for restaurants, with aiming to really solve the trend of contactless everything. I know in the US, it's very unlikely to find a quick service or casual restaurant, small or large, without the ability to order food online. They all had to go online for pre-ordering of food and delivery in order to survive. But now with everyone back to business, this technology is really here to stay. And it's not really a nice to have anymore, it's a must have. So
yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things you mentioned, I think the lesson that can be learned from the restaurant industry is that cart value basically is a lot higher in a self-service environment.
absolutely.
You know, and as you pointed out, you know, this is something that restaurants are seeing, you know, very easily, which is why not only is it that the guests want the self-service, but the restaurants want the self-service too, because their ticket prices are going up.
Yeah, and so that's why I think we've seen hotels working toward deploying this similar guest-facing technology. If it's in their food and beverage outlets, we've started to see kiosks for grab and go, or mobile ordering of food in a BYOD fashion. All is really on property digital engagement touch points. And then now, as you know, you mentioned in the opening, we have these hospitality-wide issues of labor shortages and lower occupancy. And now I think differently, rather than just the uplift, we can look toward this technology to help support those really like transactional pieces to help capture incremental revenue. So I definitely think there's a crossover with digital engagement from a food and beverage perspective for sure. Yeah. And then I agree with Robert here. So as technology becomes more and more part of our everyday lives, and as in the other verticals, retail, food and travel, as they lean further into this digital engagement space, the guest expectations of convenience of everything mobile in the palm of their hand, it's just going to carry into their pre-booking and their property digital experience. It's becoming an expectation of life. Yeah.
So, so Evan, Angie was talking a little bit about like sort of, you know, the efficiencies, and it makes me think about automation. And I know your company leans very heavily into automation and artificial intelligence. So why do you think, from your perspective, do you feel that digital guest engagement is so ripe for automation? Obviously, we talked about the labor shortage. Is that the primary catalyst here, or is there something else too?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that the labor shortage necessarily is the primary catalyst on automation. It has been very helpful in sort of demonstrating some benefits of automation. Prior to the pandemic, automation lends itself very well to hotels because, as Robert had mentioned, there are very common inquiries that guests often have. And so by automating the small little administrative things away from people's days, folks at the hotel can spend a lot more time engaging with the guests in the right ways, you know, building more personalized experiences, creating better experiences for their guests. Post-pandemic, you know, sure, labor shortage has sort of highlighted automation as a way to get back in business and streamline the operations and the check-in process. But as far as like bringing messaging and automation to the travel industry and to travelers goes, I would say it's more of stars have aligned, right? Robert mentioned again earlier how consumers, they want to do their entire travel with their mobile device, and that goes into what happens when they're on property as well. And so consumers these days are using messaging a lot. I think we've gotten to a point with our mobile devices where we're not necessarily downloading apps for businesses anymore. I think that you know, people don't really do that as much these days. But text messaging is and communication through messaging is still very, very common. And so by combining all of these together, by having the ability to by moving communication from telephone to text messaging, it creates a lot of opportunity for automation, right? It's much easier to parse out text-based messages than it is to figure out how to have a robot answer the phone, as an example.
Yeah. So I made a mistake. I did not let the audience know that we also are open to answering any questions that the audience has. If you go into Zoom, there is both a chat and a QA function. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please go ahead and put them in there, and we'll see if we can get to them. We have a bunch of stuff to cover, but we'd love to talk about what you all are interested in. Marvin, Roompricegenie operates in the automation space. They do automated revenue management. Where do you see the connection between automation and improving the guest experience? You sort of previewed that in your introduction, so I'd love to hear you expand on that.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed what Angie, Rob, and Evan had to say, and also what you said in your intro, because we already touched up on three really important points. To me, one of the points is the job of a hotelier is not anymore just whenever the guest is on site. It's just expanded so much, and there's so much more that you can do. And Angie mentioned very briefly what is a must-have and what's a nice-to-have, and actually a lot of the things that are pre and post arrivals are more turning into must-haves than they've ever been must-haves before. So while before it was a pretty cool thing to have, now you actually have to have those things. And lastly, the hoteliers are in the business for being hosts. So we work with a lot of independents. And the reason why they run a hotel is because they love being a host. So now you have being the host while the guest is there, but you also have to take care of the other things around. And that's exactly where automation comes into play. So we as technology providers, we're there to make your lives easier, to allow you to expand your scope of work from pre-arrival to post-stay by using technology, and by what Evan said, by using automation. That's exactly what we were there for. And where revenue management or price automation comes into play, it's in order to do all that, you would first need to look at running your business profitably. So oftentimes by getting your prices right, there is so much extra money you can make. And oftentimes when we speak to independents and we speak about, yeah, you can make this much extra money, they're like, oh, that's maybe greedy. Am I being greedy? I'm a host. I want to get the best for my guests. I don't want to take as much money out of their pockets as I can. But what it really is the more money you have, the better off an experience you can offer. And that's the way you need to think about it, because all those things cost money, obviously, but it's the money that you need to invest to stay relevant. The way we see it is, in the market, there are money-making tools and there are experience-enhancing tools. And what we do with Roompricegenie is a money-making tool so you can afford all the experience-enhancing tools. And ultimately, those things go hand in hand if you want to improve your business.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the impact that the guest experience tools have on your reputation has a direct impact on your downstream pricing.
Demand, yeah, right.
So it's absolutely connected. So since we're talking about revenue, Yas, let's talk about like how hotels can really move the revenue needle in the digital guest engagement sphere. And I know this is an area that ROOMDEX is really focused on. Hotels still need to make up some revenue, despite the fact that they are maintaining a high ADR, but occupancy is not good. So they need to make up revenue. What's interesting is when you think about digital guest engagement, people have been sending out pre-arrival promotional emails for a while now. I mean, probably since 2000 that's been a pretty common practice, particularly with resorts. But they haven't really necessarily been super effective. So my question would be, how can hoteliers sort of sharpen the stick, as it were, to make the pre-arrival engagement more effective for them commercially?
Yeah, I'm actually, I had one of those pre-arrival emails on Sunday. I'm in Stockholm right now, and I traveled to Stockholm on Monday. So on Sunday, I got a very nice email from the hotel I'm staying in. Actually, a very nice email with lots of information about the city I am in, about the hotel, when I'm arriving, when I'm leaving, all that kind of information was in there. There was a check-in button somewhere. There was also some reference of some stuff that potentially could be bought up front, such as breakfast or something else, but it was very hard to find that information in that beautiful email. So I think that's one of the points that hotels should think about. It's the first thing to do is really make sure that when you want to tell the guest something, that you focus on what you want to tell the guest. So if you want to do a pre-arrival email that talks about the hotel and all the services it provides, then that's one, you can do that. But if you want to actually get the guest to also purchase something, you have to make the guest aware of what's available. And you have to do that in advance, and you have to do that in a very clear and simple manner, I think, in order for you to get the guest not only know what's there, but actually also purchase some of it. And taking that a step back is that at the time of booking, the guest sets they set sort of a budget for themselves on what they want to spend on the room they're going to stay at. So let's just assume they want to spend $150 for the room they want to stay in. So then they're going to go on the website of the hotel or Expedia or wherever, and they look for a room that fits their budget, so $150. They purchase that room and then they're happy with what they've purchased. As they get closer to arriving and traveling towards the hotel, they get excited. So the excitement builds up in their minds. It's basically another good time to make them aware of something. So what we call a guest attention curve. It's sort of if you can get the guest multiple times, if you can get attention of the guest multiple times between booking and arrival, you have more opportunities, because there's a lot of psychological information that's going on, but there's also a lot of habits that happen once the guest has purchased. So as an example, if I'm getting 2 or 3 days close to arrival and my budget was $150 for the room, and I booked that 2 weeks ago, I've kind of forgotten that not totally forgotten, but I've forgotten that I spent $150. So if you now go in there and you have a better email or a text message or something else that communicates more about the additional things the guest can purchase, not only to give you more revenue, but also to give the guest more comfort, then you create an opportunity, because the guest has forgotten they've already spent $150. Now you're going to offer the next level room not for $200, but you're going to say it's only $40 more to get to the next level room. Now the guest thinks, I'm spending $40. They've forgotten about the $150, quote unquote, so they take the $40. And that then goes on during the stay of pre-arrival. You can then at that same point in time offer early arrival, late departure. You could then also bring in guest services, which at that point in time could be breakfast. You may think, well, but they're going to go to the hotel and have breakfast anyway. Yes, they do, or they might. But if they walk to the hotel and they see a Starbucks across the road of the hotel, they may decide the next morning not to have breakfast in the hotel, but just go across the road to Starbucks. If they had purchased the breakfast 1 or 2 days in advance, they'd already purchased the breakfast, they wouldn't see the Starbucks and take the breakfast. So it's basically, to the points from Evan, Angie, Marvin, and Robert earlier, you have to communicate and you have to make the guest more aware, or continuously make aware of things that can be done. So without making it too obvious, without pushing too many emails and without pushing too many things to the guest. And if you do that, then I think you can give the guest a much better experience, one, and at the same time, you can generate a substantial amount of more revenue. Another simple example is a bottle of wine. We have hotels that use this guest services component, and all they do is really selling bottles of wine. You think, well, it's just a bottle of wine, it's got to deliver to the room. But you do that once or twice a day, and now you have $30, $40, $50 more in just selling bottles of wine. Would the guest have otherwise bought the bottle of wine? Maybe if they'd looked at the digital components that are in the room, maybe if they looked at the paper that's hard to find in the room. But if it's right in front of their face, presented to them at the right time, it's a higher opportunity, and there's much more opportunity for the guests to take it and then actually buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that guests are so conditioned, and it's probably because of online travel agents to be scanning the lists of hotel rooms looking for the best price, and so therefore, once they feel that they have accomplished that goal, they've gotten the selection that they wanted, they feel they've kind of siloed that transaction. They've won that transaction. That transaction's over. That's done. A week later, when they're looking at a new offer, they're not thinking about that original transaction anymore. It's a whole fresh opportunity for them. So Marvin, Yas's system kind of piggybacks on, I know ROOMDEX piggybacks on revenue management outcomes for room pricing right now. So as an example, they're taking a yielded room rate and then adding some additional controls to derive a dynamic price for an upgrade of some kind. I'm interested. This is obviously an evolution from flat pricing that you would see that most hotels have, and like you go to the front desk and they offer an upgrade. What's the revenue management perspective on yielded ancillary guest pricing, guest service pricing, whatever it might be, whether it be room upgrades or what have you? Because it seems to me like it'd be like a natural thing to follow, but we don't really see a lot of it out there in the industry.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think you can even take this question a step back and ask it for the room pricing in general. I mean, everything where you can apply, use data you have to define what the price should be is great because you will make more money. What we do is using data to price the room correctly. And what yours does is using data to price the upgrades correctly. And in different scenarios, you would want to have different prices. If you've sold all your budget doubles and you have a lot of premium doubles left, you'd obviously want the price of the upgrade to be a little bit cheaper because you want to empty out, you want to free up some budgets, and you want to get people to pay more for the premiums. But then there are other scenarios where you maybe don't want that, where you'd rather want them to do something else. So it's just as it is with room pricing, it is also with upgrades. If you can put some dynamic and some intelligence behind it, you will just be more successful and you will make even more money with it. Oh. So it's basically, it's also guiding guests' decisions. So what we do at Roompricegenie, we price room types independently. And if there is a lot of demand for a specific room type, that has an effect of on the gap between the spoken room type and the next one. So if you see that there is a lot of demand for the budget, the price of the budget would get closer to the price of the premium. So there will be, in the booking process, will be more driven towards, oh, the gap to the premium is not too high, I'm going to get it. So then you push more people into the premium level groups, and then that will increase the gap again. So everywhere where you can intelligently and automatically use data to make better decisions, you should apply it.
Yeah, it's just anecdotally, I was at the gas station the other day, and the premium was the same price as the middle tier octane gas, because obviously no one's buying the super premium because gas prices are going up, and so literally you can have the better quality product for exactly the same price, just because they're trying to manage their inventory, not unlike a hotel needs to do. So Angie, kind of going back to you and Shiji, if you go to their website, it's honestly, over the last I guess 6 years or so, it's really grown its portfolio of products. And now as you mentioned, you're working in some more of the ancillary services of like sort of the golf and things like that. I also noticed that you guys are also in payment solutions. It seems like this is like the development of a tool set for generating ancillary guest revenue. How does does pre-arrival engagement fit into more of a holistic product development strategy for Shiji?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like you were mentioning, we do have a really broad portfolio at Shiji, and it really does touch many parts of a hotel's business. And it can help cover that digital guest journey from pre-stay all the way through post-stay. So I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, if you think about it, the guest experience really starts before that booking process even begins. So one of the things that a hotel needs to understand and that we can do is help understand their guest sentiment and identify opportunities to improve that guest first impression digitally, right? So that's one of the ways. But the portfolio of Shiji products, they're really aiming to commingle and solve that single guest itinerary as well. So when a guest is booking a room, they may also be looking to book spa, golf, and other activities. When the guest starts to shop, that's really the opportunity to make these additional services available to the guest pre-stay during booking. And because if I'm booking on property, I'm likely booking off property too. So it's really important to encapsulate all of the activities a hotel has to offer at the time of booking and to raise awareness that they exist. We we also have the concept of a golden profile or a single guest profile, where a hotel can know everything about their guests before they arrive on property. And then, so what would be important is to then leverage this information so they can help personalize that guest experience and then potentially capture incremental revenue. So as Joost mentioned, focused pre-arrival emails are more effective and better than maybe generic emails. So if you have a segment of guests coming to your property that you know have previously played golf with your brand, you could target these guest profiles and let them know the availability of tee times during their stay and provide them a direct booking link. So the pre-stay information can be sent to a customer positioned in a way of planning their stay, but also tailored to what the hotel knows that the guest enjoys based on availability. So that guest preference data and the history, it's all really stored to help hoteliers run better guest engagement strategies in communication. So really the Shiji platform, it does contain an ecosystem to cover the bases of the digital guest journey. But at the same time, we are very open to external systems and as we build with an API everything type approach.
Yas, do you have anything to say about an API everything approach?
I talked about that yesterday at the event already. But no, I was gonna kind of tag on what Angie was saying about the multiple touch points and the timing of the offer. And then I think INTELITY, Robert's company, has been around for a long time and started with probably one of the first ones, I think, with the mobile app when the iPhone came out, if I can recall it correctly. And now my arrival at the hotel here was, again, a manual arrival at the front desk. I had to fill in a form. There was nothing being sold to me. And I think that devices or applications that are prior to arrival, whether they are just to sell something or maybe to have the guest check in or pre-check-in, offer additional opportunity to make a guest aware and i.e. purchase something. And then also once they're on site, there is additional opportunities while they're in the room. And I was kind of wondering what, kind of piggybacking on what Angie was saying about all these touch points, kind of what Robert's position is on that from a multi-touch point of view.
Yeah, it's a good point, Joost and Angie. I think the multiple touch points, absolutely. I think it's not only about hitting the guest at multiple times, but it's also the vector at which you communicate with the guest. So we have, talking about chat services and texting services. One of the things that's very popular on the INTELITY platform is push messaging. You've got a specific activity that's happening at a certain time in the hotel and a broadcast to the entire guest population or a broadcast to a specific group code, those kinds of things in terms of the vector in which you approach the guest. Because what's going to happen is, some people are going to hone in on that email, and we're all in hospitality tech here. So we're scanning everything that the hotel's doing as we're coming in, and we're checking and seeing what the latest is, what technologies they're using, which ones are they not. But some guests are going to bypass that. They're not even going to pay attention to the email. I think we're all sort of in alignment that there's a new sort of set of how much money I can spend once I get to the property, and that some of the money in terms of the booking has been forgotten. But also, some guests are going to be paying attention to the email. Some are going to be paying attention maybe more to the text message. Some might be paying attention to the push message, and trying to optimize that or provide the hotelier the choice in how they wish to sort of approach it. So giving them the data, revenue manager, operations people sort of being able to take that data, make a smart decision on, hey, this is really working in terms of guest engagement, and then returning ROI. I mean, the obvious go-to points are upsells, and getting people upsells on the check-in sort of process. But the other obvious one is obviously food and beverage. Where can we hit people with food and beverage in a smart way? It's like similar to the Starbucks example a little while ago. Is the best method for doing that trying to grab them through a pre-arrival, or is the best method for doing that try to hit them in the morning when they're actually making the decision, right? You see, for instance, we do tablets in rooms in addition to the mobile apps. You see that they've set perhaps their alarm clock, and they're up at 7. Does it make sense to hit with a like a lazy advertising? We call it daydream advertising on the tablet, showing the really nice waffles or the really nice pancakes kind of coming across the tablet, and like, oh, the restaurant downstairs has this delicious looking breakfast. Let me sort of go and sort of passively, tease the guests to bring them downstairs to do that. So casinos are really good at doing this kind of stuff. It's finding the right vector, the right time of day, the right sort of audience to sort of narrow and suck people into a buy or an upsell type of decision. But at the end of the day, it's similar to what we've all sort of said here. I think, it's providing the hotel the tools, providing them the option to either move in an automated fashion, which I think hotels appreciate, particularly right now, but also providing they can do it in a non-automated way. The human mind of like, hey, something really cool is going on in our hotel. An algorithm might not catch this. Let me override the AI is doing a lot of my work and do it myself in this specific instance, right?
Interesting. So we have a question from the audience, Alan Young. Where do loyalty programs now fit in the world of driving ancillary guest revenue? Are they still a need to have, or can implementation of revenue generating platforms that are personalized take the place of old stale loyalty programs? Implementation of revenue generating platforms that are personalized. Well, the personalization piece is the interesting part. Is personalization, would it have the same impact in terms of what a loyalty program have? Would you be booking a particular hotel because they have a personalized revenue generating platform, basically personalized offers and stuff like that? Or is this kind of personalization and automation, is this going to replace loyalty programs, or is it a way to maybe empower or make better loyalty programs? Anybody?
I think it definitely goes hand in hand, because the one is for the individual stays experience, and the other one is thinking about the next stay. And I would say they could benefit from each other, but I wouldn't say that one replaces the other. So both are fulfilling a different purpose. So I wouldn't say that they replace each other, but I'm keen to hear what the others have to say.
I agree with Marvin. I think they do go hand in hand. They're part and parcel kind of the same sort of outcome. You're trying to you get the guests to return, but you're also trying to make their guest experience really good, so that they want to return, not only just for rewards, but also because the experience was good. I will say on that personalization, it can't come off as fake, right? Rewards programs are very kind of scientific, mathematically driven. Look, if I stay at this hotel so many times, I'm going to get a free night, or a boost in the quality of my room. I think people are kind of trained and understand that. I think on the personalization side, it's going on in subtle ways, across the entire sort of travel experience. We talked about that in airlines and ride sharing and things like that a little bit earlier, where those industries are more advanced in personalization. In the hotel space, if we do it, it can't feel fake, right? Like, oh, well, they had 5 bottles of wine available and they recommended 1 of 5 for me. Big deal, right? Like, I could have chose that bottle of wine. Maybe I got a view of the pool versus a view of the garden or something like that. Yes, maybe it's personalized, but it really, I think that's just the basics. It really needs to go beyond that, right? What are people really wanting to experience in their hotel stay? Is it a full leisure stay? Is it more of a business stay? Business traveler, probably wants to get in and out. Maybe they want to get meetings done. Maybe they need to know that the conference room is available. They're very specific needs as a business traveler versus a leisure traveler who might just be like, show me what you got. Tell me what the city is all about. And really going beyond the very basics of personalization, and the two approaches go hand in hand, but the personalization one can't be treated as just sort of like a mathematics game of we'll recommend 1 of 5 wines, right? It has to go beyond that.
Yes, you went dark.
I know the lobby went dark here.
It's dark in Sweden.
Like paranormal
so,
activity.
Yeah, that's weird. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone else have any comments on this? I think what occurs to me is that one of the when people talk about stale old loyalty programs, one of the reasons why stale old loyalty programs are such is because there's always this tension between how much you can offer for loyalty without, you know, digging into discounting too much. And I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but I sort of think that digital guest engagements, I think, provides a way to maybe make the delivery of benefits more effective for a loyalty program. You know, I think I think the tools that we're talking about here that we're advocating for, I think their application is in loyalty myself, and not just necessarily a replacement per se. It could be in the future, but it's hard to say.
But isn't that a great example that by just saying of old stale loyalty programs that there is a lot of room for improvement?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly.
Yeah, it speaks for itself. The question speaks for itself that there is a problem there.
Yeah. No, I think, you know,
I think there definitely is. I mean, I think old and stale is absolutely. I think loyalty is a real challenge, because I'm a member of, you know, a million different loyalty programs. I'm loyal to none of them necessarily. I think you also get into a situation where with hotel consolidation, like you go into a city, you can't help but be loyal, because the only hotels there are going to be Hiltons or Marriotts anyway. And so it's like all of a sudden, like, loyalty is not really loyalty much anymore. Anyway, that's an aside though.
Yeah, but I think you know, some form of digital personalization creates, I mean, loyalty is not the right word, but maybe is maybe not the right word. It definitely creates more commitment or more satisfaction from the guest if you can give them something that, you know, you think, or, you know, and it's not going to be 100% right, but if you give them something that they want and you offer it to them when they need it or close to that time frame, then you create something special. I think you create something unique that may be more powerful sometimes than just a plain old loyalty program that the hotel has.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think everyone's here would agree that digital guest engagement is a good thing. Let's talk about barriers to adoption. You know, Yas, you said you checked into your hotel and there really was very little effective digital engagement going on. There's probably a few different reasons for that. I would argue that one of which would be technical barriers. Yas, is there anything you can speak to in terms of your perspective on technical barriers to setting up digital guest engagement?
I mean, I think one of the big ones that is out there is that you know, the main platform of hotel has PMS still charges a lot of money just to connect something to it. So, you know, like there's five vendors on this call, that would be 5 licenses to get the whole thing up and right and working. And I think that is something that has to change. And you know, some of the newer PMS vendors are changing that by offering connectivity either at no charge or very limited charge. So I think that's one issue. But I think it's also the mindset and the urge, I think, or the urgency which some hoteliers can advance into, actually to make the digital jump. Yesterday I was in a conference and the keynote speaker was talking about everything changes within 5 years. So you need to act now, not wait until next year. Whether you have money or no money, you don't need a lot of money to put something digital in place, because it's really SaaS based. So you can do that fairly quickly. You should just make the efforts, I think, to get to that. You know, because I remember last year, everybody was talking about contactless. Once COVID started hitting, everything needed to be contactless, check in, check out, all needed to be remote. But I've continued to travel throughout the last 12 months. And I think the 10 hotels I stayed in, none of them offered mobile check-in, for example, and none of them really offered strong digital engagement. And those were hotels all over Europe and mostly over the US and 2 in Europe. And I find that kind of striking because there is a lot of technology available to implement those things in a small or in a big way, which is the way you look at it. But you've got to start somewhere. And I think if you can find a solution that allows you to create some more engagement with your guests digitally prior to arrival, you're beginning the way to make a good win for both the guests and the hotel.
So, Evan, I'm interested in your perspective on what you see as technical barriers that you'd like to see sort of resolved or come down in order to get better user adoption. And I'm also, well, let's just start with that for now.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Yos hit the nail on the head there. A lot of what we see as technical barriers, generally integrations into the PMS. Not only are there super old ones where it costs an arm and a leg to get integrated, but there's also dozens and dozens of these. I think at this point, Akia is integrated into over 3 dozen different PMS just to support the industry. And they all have varying levels. Internally, we have different tiers of integrations for each PMS, and that enables different types of capabilities. Now, this group has talked a ton about, Angie mentioned the type of information that we're capturing around each guest. Like you can consolidate a wealth of data, but you need to integrate into something to be able to make use of that data. And that ties into the loyalty programs, right? So at the best level of integration that Akia has, as an example, we don't necessarily need a loyalty program because we know that the guest has come like 4 times. And so you can personalize messaging and personalize some of our mini apps relevant to the guest's profile. Are they a loyal guest? Do they enjoy golf? Render different components within our mini apps depending on what their guest profile looks like, et cetera, et cetera. And at the worst level of engagement, we have none of this data, right? The best we can do is shoot them a text message and do a little bit back and forth, send some generic information, and really not do much more than open up the line for communication. And until either we see a lot more consolidation within this space, or I know there are some standards around APIs, but in reality, we don't see that. We don't see that too often.
Interesting. So we've got roughly 7 minutes left. So we haven't been able to get to all the questions, but so I want to make sure that I hit just a couple before we wrap this up. In terms of like return on investment, and people are, in terms of investing into automation, how do you kind of measure return on investment? And I pose this to Marvin, since you're heavily into automation.
For us, from a revenue management side, there's always 2 things. It's the time saved and the money made. So return on investment is not only how much extra money do you have in your pockets, but also how much extra time do you have freed up to take care of other things. And that's really what we look at it from a pricing perspective, from a revenue management perspective. Yes, obviously we make you a lot of more money. So on average, we see that around 20% revenue increase is possible, because you go from not doing much to suddenly doing a lot, or having the machine do a lot. But you always have to keep in mind that freeing up your time, because it is the most crucial resource that you have, is essential as well. And that's also when it comes to in deciding in what technology you invest in. It's really also asking the questions, what tasks am I doing currently, or what tasks should I do that I don't have time for, that I spend too much time on? And as soon as you learn that technology is your friend, that it helps you run a better business, because you can have a computer take care of many things that you can take care of yourself, then you will think differently about the return on investment. So sometimes from a money perspective, yes, I can give you numbers what other clients experience, but every case is different. And that's the same for, I guess, for Jos and what he does. It's similar. I can tell you experiences that others made, but your return on investment is going to be heavily dependent on what you personally are doing at the moment. So it's always a mix between time and money, and the time factor is actually a really important one that you should not forget.
Robert, let's go back to barriers. Your company has probably been encountering the age-old argument about service culture. If you're providing these tablets and these apps and all these different ways for people to interact without having to talk to a person, are you still out there seeing a cultural reluctance to go digital in terms of providing service levels? Does that still exist? People still say, my guests will want to see my face. I mean, do you hear that a lot?
Yeah, COVID's been miserable for everybody on the planet. I think, well, the one thing that it has done in regards to your question is it, has trained everybody that like, look, there is a need for digital capability everywhere, right? Like whether it's a QR code for a restaurant menu or some of the more advanced things we were talking about. So I think, post-COVID, we have no barrier to, hey, a digital option needs to be available. And I think then it comes back to the hotel's preference. And we never recommend installing an INTELITY platform and saying, hands off, no more staff, and you're not going to greet anybody or anything like that. You have a guess of both, pathways, right? A non-digital pathway and a more digital pathway, right? And you let the guests kind of decide. You may have some resorts, you may have some specific properties that are really into the culture of the face-to-face interaction, showing people the property, taking them to their room, particularly on a luxury or upper upscale sort of level. And that's going to continue to exist. There's going to be people who appreciate that. And there's going to be operations and revenue people that say, that's what makes the difference here. That's why we charge more ADR. And we don't try to get rid of that. But I do think we've reached, particularly post-COVID, a level of you need to have a digital pathway, whether that's just a web interface that's very friendly or a chat sort of product installed or a full INTELITY install where you've got digital touch points across the entire guest stay. I think we've come to that is, to use the conversation earlier, that's really table stakes today. You kind of have to have something. May not be super elaborate, but you need to have something in place that allows people to move in that direction. I also say the ratings standards, AAA and the diamonds and Forbes and the stars, as you get to those upper levels, they have requirements in that regard, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get a 5-star property if you've got no digital anything, right? That's not going to happen, right?
No, that's really interesting. Angie, so we're getting towards the end here. I'm gonna kind of finish with you. Shiji is a global company, and in many different markets. Are you seeing different kinds of adoption rates for digital engagement in different parts of the world, or are you seeing, when you obviously serve many different types of hotels, or is adoption based on hotel class? Like maybe what Robert was implying was like maybe the super high-end luxury, are reluctant to do it, but now they are obliged to do it. Like, how do you see adoption globally?
Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think it's always related to geography. As Joost mentioned, he's traveled internationally, and many of the hotels he's encountering, they're not having these digital touch points that you'd expect. And as Robert mentioned, if you go to a 5-star hotel, you're going to expect a higher level of service, of even maybe these digital touch points than you would do at a lower star. So I think that both of those things, I think, are a factor as well. But also, if hotels are looking to adopt digital engagement technology, they have to also make sure that they're building on a solid foundation. So I think Joost's comment from the CEO that he heard speaking this week, everything changes in 5 years. You can put something in SaaS in place very quickly. Well, not always, because a barrier to adoption could be you're running an older tech stack. Or maybe that tech stack you're running, it doesn't have the endpoints needed to connect with the digital partners. And with that alone, you're not gonna be able to run as fast. So, and then it depends if the foundation you're sitting on is a closed or open ecosystem. And then another point, adoption rates, they're really just not about the tech capabilities either. The velocity, adoption, and rollout, it also depends on how easy a solution is to implement or to train new staff. If that training curve is steep, it could cost a hotel twice as much in just time alone. So I think it's a combination of these things that determine adoption globally of specific technologies.
Cool, excellent. Well, it's the top of the hour. We've been speaking for an hour, and I would really thank all of our panelists here. Just want to let the audience know that, as usual, this webinar has been recorded, and we will upload it to the ROOMDEX site later today, and you'll receive an email with the link as well. If you have any further questions, any even specific questions for specific panelists, please go ahead and send it out to info@roomdex.io, and we'll make sure it gets into the right hands and your question gets answered. Again, thank you, panelists, very much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Bye-bye.